Jackie Martling, Peter Bales, and our podcast is Standup Memories.
I probably should not point this out, but he's wearing the same shirt as last week.
I was so close to getting that. Standup Memories is our podcast, and here we go, we're back.
Okay. Same shirt.
It's the same shirt because it's the same day, and we have the illusion.
No, what you're supposed to say is you felt nostalgic for last week's show, so you put on the same shirt, because that's what I did.
What we're not going to say is I'm wearing the same tighty-whities as 3 weeks ago.
Oh. Did you make in your pants? No. What's that smell? Well, not recently. So, out of the clear blue sky, did you ever go to the Westbury Drive-In?
Yes, back in the day.
Now, this is a way to date ourselves, because the Westbury Drive-In is now 19,000 movie theaters. But in the old days, going to the drive-in, I can still remember my first trip to the drive-in to see the great locomotive chase with Fess Parker, and my mother loaded the car with a bunch of us. But as you got older, we would go, and one time, me and Chris Bates, the guy I play guitar with, we went with two girls, and we got in the trunk of my car, and the girls paid for the two of them to go into the drive-in, and we went in, and then they let us out of the trunk, luckily, and we watched the movie, and we thought it was so much fun. And it wasn't for a month or two later that they were giggling, and they said, we have to come clean. We knew the person at the ticket booth, so we had given them the money for the tickets. So
oh my God!
They pocketed the money. But that's not the reason I'm telling the story. Is
oh my goodness!
A very good friend of mine, Frank Bear. His name is Frank Bear, and I call him Frankie No Clothes, which is very, very creative. Bear No Clothes, and he's still a very good friend. 40 years later, we're going to have like a 50-year grammar school reunion this summer. It's just exciting. And he just didn't do real well with girls. So, and I had this girlfriend, Jamie, and I got her to fix up Frankie. He had a car, and I didn't. You know, you just like comedy. You know, when you're in high school, the guys with a car, they're at a premium. You know, so I had this old green Ford. I think I never. You know, he's one of those guys who could tell you what every car was. All I could tell you is it was blue. You know. But we fix him up with this girl, and he's like Don Knotts. He's petrified. And all I remember is on the way to the drive-in, he took out a cigarette and he lit the filter. Which right away you could feel the girl saying, this guy's a putz, right? Also in these days, there were double features. So you'd sit and watch a movie, and then they'd show a second movie. And, you know, you'd walk to the stand and get the popcorn, and there was a little speaker, like a metal speaker with a claw. And the claw went over your window, and if it was cold, you rolled the window up, but the speaker was there. If it was summer, but the claw held the speaker on the window. It was one little crappy speaker. It was a horrible way to see a movie.
Yeah.
But it was the drive-in.
And it's the way the Flintstones did.
So, me and Frank and Jamie and Vicky go to this movie, and it was the classic, we're in the back seat, and we're like making out and fooling around, and him and the girl are as far apart as they can be and still both be in the front seat. You know, he's up against this corner. I might be exaggerating, but I don't think so. And this is when there was still, you know, one seat. You know, there's no bucket seat or anything. You know, that's like far apart. And there's no common ground. And we're not talking. We're old friends. I don't know what we're doing by then, but we're certainly having fun and fooling around. And they are getting absolutely nowhere. And so all of a sudden the first movie's over, and the popcorn starts dancing, and the Coca-Cola's dancing, and the candy bars are dancing. Oh, go help yourself. You know, go to get some food at the concession stand. Should you drive away with the speaker, please deposit your speaker. There was actually a bin on the way out
Right.
of the drive-in, where if you accidentally drove away with the speaker, you would drop the speaker in the bin. Finally, he's got an opening to talk. Ha! Could you imagine somebody being that stupid? Imagine somebody being that big of what? And I mean, went on and on and on. And me and Jamie are in the back seat. I don't know if we were having sex, but we might have been. But we're having a wild old time. And he's going on and on and on about this. And it's winter, so the windows all the way up with the speaker hooked on it. And he's going on and on and on. And we're making out, and they're not saying anything by this point. And he goes, this sucks. Let's get out of here. And he takes off. It didn't pull out the speaker. The speaker ripped out the window, which splattered glass all over her, him, me, Jamie. The entire car was splattered with broken glass, shards and little pieces of glass. Not only that, it's winter. So there's no window, and we are freezing, but I'm peeing. I'm laughing. It was just the absolute greatest, and we just laughed and laughed and laughed. Needless to say, they did not get married.
Boy.
But it was one of the great, I've told the story a million times, I've never heard anybody say, I ripped out a window. Everybody says, no, look, it just pops right out, and you put it.
Man, the memories that I have when I listen to your stories, at the beginning of that, your friends tricked you into getting in the trunk to embarrass you. Going into the...
Oh, no, they didn't. These are two girls. They were our dates. We got in the trunk to save money.
I know. Okay, well, that sets a story off in my mind, a true story. Let's go back to the year 1950.
A true story, unlike your other true stories. This one actually happened.
This is about my father. It's 1950. He's in Penn Station. He's about to get on a train out to Long Island. A friend comes up to him and goes, Bill, boy, am I glad I found you. I forgot to bring money. I have no money for a ticket home. Can you help me out? My father goes, gee, I'm so sorry, Joe, but I only have enough money for my ticket. I'm really, really sorry. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll hide you up. We'll put you on the train, and we'll hide you under my coat and your coat, and the conductor won't see you. So they get on the train, and
is this true?
This is true. The guy kneels down in front of the seat, and they put two coats over him. And the conductor comes down the aisle, and he's taking tickets and money, and my father, gives the money, and then he looks down in front of him and whips the coats off and says to the conductor, and here's the money for my friend's ticket. He always rides like that. Isn't that great?
I love that.
I
thought you would say your father went.
That would have worked. And also,
it's such a harmless fun.
It's fun. It's harmless fun. And, you mentioned drive-in movies, and young people don't know what they are. 1950s, when car culture took over America, they were a staple. And you mentioned Fess Parker. Fess Parker. As a history teacher, let me say this. Fess Parker, great actor, really terrific actor, played on television Daniel Boone, played in the movies and on television Davy Crockett, two historical figures who wore coonskin caps and buckskin, and an entire generation was completely confused, could not tell the difference between Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone.
I was so offended after Davy Crockett took the gig as Daniel Boone.
How can you do that?
It's like Paul McCartney joining the Rolling Stones. What are you doing to me?
I'm not the only one. I was upset about that, and nobody could tell the difference between Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was at the Alamo.
And meanwhile, Davy Crockett, in the heads of everybody in the country, he was a 99 out of 100, and Daniel Boone, a few people watched that or knew of. Everybody knew his name, but Davy Crockett was ridiculously ubiquitous. They had photographers come to take pictures of me and my brother, and we would not pose for that photographer unless we could wear our Davy Crockett T-shirts.
Oh, wow.
And our I think even the hats. to the point where we have the pictures wearing the stupid Davy Crockett, you know.
You want to hear a great line from Daniel Boone? I bet you haven't even heard it. Probably has heard it. But anyway, so Daniel Boone goes out in the woods, and he's out there, doesn't come back for 6 months. And he comes back after 6 months. And they said, Daniel, were you lost? And he goes, no, I wasn't lost. But I was a bit confused for a few months. Isn't that a great line?
That's just so great. Now, so maybe I didn't tell you about my story about the Alamo.
Do you have a story about the Alamo?
If you were raised in the 50s, it was Disneyland. I still remember watching they made the TV show Disneyland. The reason he created that show was as an advertisement for Disneyland in California.
Yes.
It was like a what do you call them? When there's a show like to
Cross promotion, a spin-off?
When people are selling soap, it was an infomercial.
Okay.
The first infomercial was Disneyland, and I remember watching that as a kid and thinking, Disneyland, California. I'm telling you, it may as well have been on Pluto. The idea of getting in a plane. I used to ask my friends that had been on planes, do you really look down and see clouds? And I could start crying right now because I think when I was 40, when I finally made a few dollars, and me and Nancy were both poor kids, and we went to Disney World. And when we first walked down Main Street and Cinderella's Castle, I get choked up right now. It was like we died and went to heaven, and we're 40 years old. But here, so, you know, spinning Marty and Davy Crockett and all the Davy movie, Davy Crockett, the Alamo. And me and my buddy drive across America. We steal my parents' car. I said, I just want my car, want the family car so I can go to orientation at Michigan State University. It's 3 days in August. So we get in the car. We go around the corner and put the surfboards on the car at my buddy's house. My father ran into Jimmy's mother at the supermarket and said, yeah, the boys are going to Michigan State for a couple of days. And his mother said, well, why would they have had surfboards on the car? And he says, what are you talking about? So we go to Michigan State. Then we come down, and I'm telling you, this is in the old days. I mean, we're driving along in Kansas and stopping at, a one gas pump gas station where the whole family comes out of the little house to see these guys with the surfboards on the car in the middle of Kansas.
Fill it up with Ethel, if Ethel don't mind.
There you go. But I mean, it's a whole story. But I mean, St. Louis, Kansas City, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, through the Grand Canyon and through Death Valley. I mean, and we had $700 between us when we left. To this day, I will never know. 6 weeks we were gone. But we're coming back, and I can still remember the drive across Texas. That is a big state. And we came from El Paso. We're driving and driving and driving and driving. And of course, we're going to the Alamo with Davy Crockett, right? And we get to the Alamo at and I'm not making this up. God strike me dead. I don't care. Anybody believes me. And this may sound a tad bit racist, but it's not. We get to the Alamo at 5:30. And the Alamo closed at 5 o'clock. It's a National Historical Monument. It closed at 5 o'clock. And it's an adobe structure, but there's a courtyard. And the courtyard is surrounded by an adobe wall that's maybe 4 feet tall and 4 feet thick, but it's up to here and it's around. And it's like, we came all this way. We're children of Davy Crockett. We're going to see the damn Alamo. And we go over the wall into the courtyard of the Alamo, and the security guard catches us. And the security guard is Mexican. which is just, and he takes us into the office, and we're like, listen, man, we're kids that grew up on Davy Crockett, blah, 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 and we cried and begged that, it's not a big deal. We weren't going to steal anything. And the guy just lets us go, which is just still amazing.
It is amazing.
And I told everybody for the last 50 years, I said, if Davy Crockett had defended the Alamo as well as that Mexican security guard, we'd still have the Alamo. But how the irony of the whole thing is just so. You could not make that up. I swear.
In a great irony, Jackie has just remembered the Alamo.
I told the story 1,000 times, and I have never said that.
You've never said, "I remember the Alamo."
I remember.
You talk about a national historical site. I think about something that happened to me on a tour of Gettysburg National Park, and I was so struck by it. I used it as the title of a book, A Humorous Look at American History, touring Gettysburg National Park with a small group and a tour guide. And a woman actually, I remember she raised her hand for some reason to ask the tour guide a question. How come they always had the battles in national parks? And it was a serious question.
I gave you credit for coining that for your book.
That is, yes.
But
absolutely. How come they always had the battles in national parks? And
that's who's buried in Grant's tomb.
Oh, you can't imagine. And I always say that I was so struck by that logic that later on I went up to her in the parking lot and I said, I like how you think. You ever wonder, how come meteors always land in craters? Yes, that's very interesting. How come meteors always land in craters?
Do you know I actually have a Gettysburg joke?
You have a Gettysburg joke?
Yeah. Grandpa is with his grandson, and they're sightseeing, and they get to Gettysburg. And he says to his grandson, "Sonny boy, you see that field over there?" You know this joke?
No.
"You see that field over there, Sonny boy? That's where they fought the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. And Sonny boy, there's a lot of people that say the Battle of Gettysburg was the turning point of the Civil War." The kid says, "Duh, Grandpa. Tell me something I don't know." He's right.
I love it.
Your grandmother slept with everybody on the high school football team.
Oh, you know what? I love jokes that start out smart, and he had the right year for the Battle of Gettysburg, 1863, and then bang. I love it. I love it.
And of course,
what a great joke.
That's, fill in as filthy a punchline as you want. Because if you knew the punchline I usually use, it's like frightening. But that's
But you made a joke out of something that was incredibly intense, tragic. All the men who died there. It was the turning point of the war, and yet you still made a joke out of it. That's why I say there's no topic off limits, and sometimes inside comedy. And you're going to get this. People take tragedy, comedians, it's their job to take tragedy and sometimes make light of it. And the ultimate example of that, when you can't deal with the reality of something, you make a joke out of it. And here is a joke that started making the rounds very early in the 1800s after the Civil War. And it's a joke without a setup. All it needs is the punchline. And it is, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play?
I swear to God, when you were done talking what you were going to saying what you're going to say, I was going to say that line.
That is
which fits every when it's like when this much goes wrong, but this
when you can't deal with the horror, you can turn to comedy sometimes, and that's the ultimate example of it.
And that's just crazy.
Oh, I love it. I like comedy. Can help you deal with things. It's. Robert Klein said, "I had no punch, but I had punch lines." And it's a very healthy way to deal with your issues. A lot of comedians, when they start out, are dealing with their issues, not with drugs, not with alcohol, not with violence, God forbid, but with comedy.
Trying to escape. You know, after like a couple weeks after Kennedy was assassinated, Lenny Bruce had, I think, either a Madison Square Garden show or a pretty big, important, I don't know if it was Carnegie Hall, but some really, really important show. And Kennedy had been shot, but they couldn't cancel the show. And he's like, you know, what the hell can I possibly say? And do you know what he said?
What?
He came on stage. The first thing out of his mouth was, Vaughn Meter's fucked.
Tell the audience who
Vaughn
that is.
Meter was a guy who had very little success, except he looked and sounded exactly like John F. Kennedy. And so he had an album.
It was a
the best-selling album, I think maybe of all time up until then, called The First Family. And it was because he sounded like John Kennedy, and he was ripping it up, and he was making a fortune. And then all of a sudden, there's no John Kennedy.
It ended.
And, But that, pulled the plug out of the tension, and like Lenny Bruce went on to, you diffuse something. There's a comic named Roger Rittenhouse from Denver. I never saw him again, but I worked with him at Just for Laughs at Montreal, and he was on the show. It was me and Robert Schimmel. It was an incredible show. And he has a hook, but not a fake hand. I mean, he's missing a hand. He has the prosthesis with the two prongs. Did I ever tell you this story?
No, I don't know.
Because I just realized that that's not the story I was going to tell. But the thing is, he has this metal, monstrous, ugly hand, but he would come out on stage and make like 2 jokes about it and address it and never mention it again. And it was so funny. It was like the elephant in the room got shooed away. But before the show, we're sitting in the green room. I am sure I told you the story.
No.
And it's me, Robert Schimmel, Nick DiPaolo, Dave Chappelle, who wasn't Dave Chappelle yet,
Right.
It was 1993.
Right.
And Paul Provenza and whoever else, and my wife Nancy, and we're sitting there, and Roger Rittenhouse is sitting there, and he's got a mug of coffee, and he's holding it with this prosthesis with 2 metal fingers, and he was done with his coffee, and he's just holding the mug. And out of a clear blue sky, Paul Provenza stood up and threw a quarter into the mug. It was breathtakingly funny. I mean, it was like so cold. It was unbelievable.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Went nuts.
Hysterical.
And then years later, when we made the Aristocrats, we were up in Sundance, and I said, Provenza, do you remember what you did with Roger Rittenhouse? And I told everybody the story, and they went nuts. And he said, I don't remember. I said, if you don't remember it, it's my story.
Listen, we're doing jokes. You can do jokes about momentous historical events, and it helps you to deal with them. I have a new bit in my act. It's literally...
Speaking of momentous events.
Because I'm celebrating the new century, and it was time for a new bit. And I'm a social studies teacher, and I'm telling the class, I remember where I was when I found out President John Kennedy was assassinated. And I remember where I was when I first heard about 9/11. And this kid in the back of the room goes, hey, where were you when the Titanic went down? And the class laughed, and I said, I was freezing in the water with Leonardo DiCaprio because that bitch would not let us up on her platform that she was floating on. And everybody laughs at that, and everybody's seen Titanic, and I'm doing that joke, and I see the audience turn to themselves and start going, yeah, there was room up there. There was room up there. Why didn't she let him up there? You really hit a nerve.
And you lose sight of because they can. It was something they knew and they could deal with.
They knew and they could deal with it. I love this stuff.
My grandfather was one of the guys who survived the Titanic.
Your grandfather survived the
Survived it.
Titanic?
Yeah, but he was in his room with an inflatable doll.
Well, that is, and I mean that's a perfect way to conclude this episode of Stand-Up Memories. That is Jackie Martling. I'm Peter Bales, and we will see you next time. That's so funny. Hey, a new episode of Stand-Up Memories every Wednesday.
How exciting is that?
Starring me, Peter Bales, and right here, Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Please follow us on social media. Search it out. What is it? Me space?
MySpace,
Your space?
TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Doodah, doodah.